And welcome, fight fans. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And it is Saturday, June 3rd, 2017. And we are getting ready for UFC 212 live from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Jose Aldo against Max Blessed Holloway. Excuse me. Woof. All right. I just want to kind of get right into it. I know this is coming out a little late. By the time this uploads, prelims will be starting. If you wanted to see my Fight Pass prelims picks, you can check that out on the video. One of the videos I'll put in the notation, the Tough Ultimate Fighter Episode 7 review and recap. And I did a little prediction show. Prediction picks with the first three fights on that card. So check that out. My picks, if you were wondering, got them on the board here. That would be Figueiredo in the first opening fight, Pereira and Chagas. Going to round that out. Starting with the FS1, Foxsports 1 prelims that's going to be starting, I believe, at 8 o'clock. They're going to have the 4 fights. Headlined, the Foxsports prelim, excuse me, as we know words get hard sometimes, just like give them some things. Anyway, we need to cut that out. Let's talk fights, people. Let's talk fights, and let's talk about tonight's fights. Like I said, which are starting in a little bit. Meant to get this out a little earlier. I'm a little inconsistent with that. Hopefully, as if I can grow an audience, I'll definitely get definitely a lot more consistent as we move on through and grow as a channel. All of us here. I'm just going to be doing some changes. You'll start to see some subtle changes come into the videos and some subtle changes, in my surroundings here, as you see. Got my new pick board up. You can't really see it in any of the shots. That's too bad. It's nice. I got some nice dry erase markers, and you can all DX suck it if you don't like that. So I want to talk about, before we get into it, I have one thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to jump right in. I'm going to trying to keep this about a 25-minute video. I know a lot of my videos are run long because I do sometimes go off on tangents, and we will be shooting a live recap show right after tonight's fights end, right after that main event between Max Holloway and Jose Aldo, live from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Max Holloway's first time fighting in Brazil. I think he said he was only there. The first time he was there was when they did a little bit of media, and then he, had been back, obviously, for the fight week. So it's been kind of recent that he's first gone to Brazil. If I knew I was going to be fighting in Brazil, again, especially against a guy like Aldo, depending on when I knew that was going to happen, I probably would have taken a trip there, just amongst anything else, just to go there and try to acclimate myself to things and just get a feel for what it's like being there, and obviously not do a training camp, but do some training and some regimented training while I was out there to kind of get used to it, man. Especially I would go out to Rio if I figured that's where they do most, not most, but they do a lot of fights there. And when some of the big fights are in Brazil, they usually do them out there in Rio. They get good turnout everywhere. It's I think it's the biggest city out there in Brazil. A lot of tourist attractions and whatnot there. But we're gonna get into that soon. We're gonna definitely. I'm really excited about Marlon Moraes making his UFC debut. A lot of people, if you don't know who he is, if you don't ever watch the World Series of Fighting, Marlon is absolute beast, man. He's a really good. I feel really good size, 135 pounder, man. He's good everywhere. He's tough. He's a smart fighter. He's gotten better. We're gonna get into his a lot of his career, especially in World Series, and as we do these picks and the predictions, but I do want to start. Excuse me. We're gonna start the bottom of the card. I'm gonna make my picks on some of the lower fights, the beginning fights on FS1, which like I said begin I believe at 8 o'clock Eastern time here on the East Coast. 6:30, I believe the Fight Pass prelims start. Their 3 Fight Pass prelim fights. Generally, they try to make those run in like half-hour increments. So now they promote that fight and produce it, and put the intros out. So hopefully, everything lines up in order. The 4. Had to just make sure and check on the board there. The 4 Fight Pass. The 4 prelims on Foxsports 1 with the premiere fight, the premiere headlining, the premiere fight on that part of the show being by Rafael Assunção, the number 3 ranked bantamweight in the world in the UFC. He's a great fighter, and we're gonna go over a lot of him. I'm gonna get in depth with Moraes' fight against Assunção in the pay-per-view. I'm just going to go over real quick some of these and who I like in some of these undercard fights. There is some good ones, obviously. This is a really good card, man. I really like it. Some people kind of criticized it and were saying that this might be like, say, an FS1 type of show, fight night show, or what. This is the 145-pound title. Like it or not, to what happened to Jose Aldo, and I've never been like the hugest Jose Aldo fan. I mean, he is great. I totally respect what he does, but in just my opinion, he's pulled out of a lot of fights, just so many fights. And if you're a fan that has had tickets for many a fight and never one of his, so in his defense, he never personally, screwed me over there on that, and I do look at it as that. Especially, I mean, it's like a collaboration of a screw job. When you have tickets for a fight and you lose like the main event or and that's happened to me so many times. I can't even get into it in time. Some of the fights that I was supposed to go see, and that didn't turn out the way that you had hoped. So, first fight on the FS1 prelims, the Fox Sports 1 prelims, is Yuri Alcantara, who's just such a dangerous bantamweight. He's fought some of the best guys in the world. Really the only ones he's really lost to, especially in the UFC, have been guys that are up there ranked, guys like Uriah Faber, and he has some big wins in his career as well. So it's a tough. It's definitely going to be a tough fight for his opponent, who is Brian Kelleher. Not knowing that a lot of people might not know too much about Mr. Kelleher. This isn't his first time in the UFC, but he definitely doesn't have the experience. Excuse me, I meant to say this is his first time in the UFC, but he does have some decent experience outside the UFC, fighting in Ring of Combat, CFFC. He's in New York. He's out of New York, so he's in East Coast. He's on the East Coast, so he fights out a lot of those smaller promotions, CFFC. Like I said, Ring of Combat, and he's fought in CFFC a bunch more times than I actually thought. And that is you're not familiar with CFFC, it is a promotion out of Jersey, Cage Fury Fighting Championships. So, and you see a lot of guys, out of the Sarah camp and stuff will fight on those type of cards in the other one. Sorry, we're having a little issue here with my tablet. It's something, I'm freaking Sherdog, man. I keep getting these pop-ups, like if they're like pop-up viruses or whatnot, when I'm trying to look at something on there on one of my tablets, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. But we're gonna move over to my backup tablet, which I guess is a little better.
a little better holding back some of these viruses. But yeah, Kelleher making his UFC debut. This is a tough guy to make your debut against. I'm liking Alcantara in this fight. I think Alcantara can probably win this fight anywhere. He's good striking. He's good everywhere. So I mean, the only thing and I'm not too familiar with Kelleher, so I'm not going to try and talk about him like I am. But I do think if he does have really good wrestling, that's one thing he might be able to control with Alcantara. He just has to hope that he's able to fight off some of that jiu-jitsu, because Alcantara is, I do feel, and I'm sure he feels confident in fighting a little bit off his back as he needs to. Obviously, you don't want to stay on your back very long. That just is a control factor in how it looks to the judges. So going with Alcantara in this, we'll see if he is able to, if he's able to stop Kelleher's trying to have a successful UFC debut. So good luck to him, and good luck to both these guys, and hope it's a good fight, and that's going to start it off. So I hope they get us all pumped up for that. Now, going into the next fight on UFC, the prelims for the 212, is Johnny Eduardo versus Matthew Lopez. Now, Lopez is 9-1. This is another 135-pound fight, so the UFC really does have to start pushing the 135-pound division, being that Cody Garbrandt is trying to act like he cleaned the division out. You beat one guy, bro. I mean, you're an awesome fighter, man. You're great, and you've only beaten one. You beat Dominic Cruz. That's fine. You didn't like destroy him. You didn't knock him out. You didn't, you technically did a lot of things to him that's never been done to him, and I think that frustrated him. I don't think you'd see that again out of Dominic Cruz. I'm not saying that Dominic will beat Cody in a rematch. I'm starting to think that Cody thinks that Dominic will beat him in a rematch, kind of considering coming out now and saying that he would not give something about Dominic Cruz has had his chance and this, that, and the other. Hey, let me tell you something. I don't really feel it's the job of the fighter to dictate who they're going to fight next. That's just not. I don't agree with that at all. When you get to a point, say where Demetrios Johnson is at, then you can definitely say that's not. I'm not going to fight this guy. It's not worth my money, my time, whatever it may be. But Demetrios hasn't made enough money to even turn down something that might be the closest thing to a super fight that he's had since he fought Dominic Cruz. But it wasn't a super fight back then because they weren't the fighters of the magnitude that they are today. Now let's get back to this fight. Eduardo versus Lopez. I'm liking Eduardo. This is such, obviously, the fight being in Brazil, it's a pretty heavy Brazilian card. So with that being said, I'm actually a little surprised that I'm picking Eduardo in this. I've seen Lopez fight. Both these guys are really good fighters. Obviously, Lopez is 1-1. He has a loss to Ronnie Yaya in the UFC, which was not too long ago in December, of last year, 2016. So I think he's definitely going to be a good fight here. I see some of these fights actually being going a little long, and I'll get into that with the ones I think is going to be that too. I kind of see this one going all 3 rounds for some reason, and just one fighter just kind of getting where they, this kind of dominating in one aspect and seeing it kind of go from there. But not one of the fights that you're kind of too crazy about. Like I said, you're not knowing too much about it. I mean, Eduardo has had an up and down UFC career, so as far as you can, somebody make sure on that. Sometimes I'm not going off, notes here. I'm just trying to go freehand and get this out. I'm already 14 minutes in, and like I said, I wanted to keep it to 20, so I only got about 15 minutes left for to keep this under a half hour. Eduardo, does have a good amount of fights in the UFC. Has actually a loss to Sun Sao. He's beaten Eddie Wineland, lost to Aljamain Sterling, beat Manny Gambarian in Manny Gambarian's final fight. So Gambarian was kind of an easy fight for him. It looks, it's not really, but what are you going to do? I think Eduardo is very inconsistent. So, but I am kind of picking him in this fight. We'll see where he goes. He did look really good in that last fight against Manville, the Anvil. So let's hope that both these guys put on a good show and keep it nice and clean. Now we're gonna start getting into the fights that I'm really excited about, and the next one is the third fight. If you want to call it the premier fight on the Fox Sports prelim, and that is Antonio Carlos Jr. against Eric Spicely. Spicely is a tough Latin America contestant, and Carlos Jr. was a tough Brazil contestant. So, the Ultimate Fighter being, they put that brand global, did well with it everywhere for at least when they brought it out. So, they're trying to build the fighters off of it. I am liking Spicely in this. Just kind of going to go against the grain. Carlos Jr. has had a little bit of an up and down himself, and Spicely has a loss in the UFC as well. So both these guys are really looking to, distance themselves from that 20, that 21 through however the rest of many middleweights that they have in the UFC. So I'm, like I said, picking Spicely, and I kind of think I wouldn't be surprised if it's by a knockout, but I don't usually try to predict that, but we'll see how that goes. The next fight is the one I've been really wanting to talk about, and I'm going to go a little bit in depth. We're going to talk in a few minutes about that, and here we go. Marlon Moraes against Rafael Assunção. Like I said earlier in the show, Assunção has basically fought so many guys. He's coming off a loss to TJ, which was a tough fight. He has victories over many UFC many UFC bantamweights, and some really good ones. His most recent would be over Aljamain Sterling. Sterling, who's actually now gotten back on track and is hopefully cleared his head out for his sake, and is going to do a little bit better. He's fighting, actually, I believe he's fighting on the Long Island card coming up. But Assunção is tough. He used to train out of Georgia. I'm not sure where he trains now, but I know he trained with Brian Stan. He's a little brick house, man, and he's tough. He's good everywhere. He's a real class act. You got to really like Assunção. You got to like the way he fights, and if you don't really like his personality, he's not like a prickish type. So it's easy. He seems like an easy guy to root for. Victories over Caraway, Pedro Munoz. He has a victory actually over TJ Dillashaw. TJ, actually, like I just said, actually avenged that loss. That was a split decision, really close fight. Vaughn Lee, Mike Easton, Israelia Tamira. He has a victory over Johnny Eduardo. He lost to Eric Koch. LC Davis has a loss to Uriah Faber. Lost to he's and those were all in the WEC actually. Made his UFC debut at UFC 128, where he lost to Eric Koch by KO. I think he was probably fighting at 145. It would be my guess, because I don't see Eric Koch fighting at 135. So I think that fight was at 145, and that obviously that would probably be a tough weight for him. So he's obviously recovered. He has had a seven fight winning streak in the UFC, coming off being actually stopped by TJ Dillashaw. So if Assunção had beaten Dillashaw, he definitely would have gotten that title shot. Obviously, an obvious statement right there. Thank you, Captain Obvious. But it's back on track against Sterling. This is a tough fight for him. This is a tough fight for Marlon Moraes. Moraes, who has not lost, I believe, since 2011. It is on. Let me just get this right. He won the. He won the inaugural. Fought at a catchweight of 147 pounds for WSOF against Cody Bollinger. Bollinger, who was from the Ultimate Fighter, one of the seasons in between 15 and 20, I believe. I could be wrong about that. If I am, post what season he was on in the comments if somebody can, if there's anybody listening. Thanks. Anyhow, Bollinger was had a weight problem in when he was on Tough, and obviously had a weight problem going into this fight against Moraes back in 2015. I'm sorry, 2014. This was right after he won the inaugural bantamweight title. I guess that fight was, if I remember correctly, that fight was supposed to be for the 135-pound title. That was going to be his first defense, and since he missed weight by so much, that's what they believe they did the catchweight bout at. He ended up first time defending his title in 2015, which was close to a year after he actually won it, getting his first title defense against Josh Hill, where he won by unanimous decision. Now, he has not lost since 2011, where he was triangled in Ring of Combat, where he was actually fighting at 145. So, is on 3, 6, 9. I think it's like a 12 or 13 personal winning streak that he's on right now, not to mention the consecutive amount of fights that he won in WSOF, which a lot of people, some even UFC fighters, will call it a C organization. Depending on what part of the card you're watching with WSOF at the time, which is now the professional PFL, the Professional Fighter League, which is actually making its debut very soon with John Fitch fighting someone, and they're actually going to pay these guys a salary, and that's great. We'll talk more about that at a later date. But Moraes is such a tough kid, man. Finally in the UFC. Hopefully he's getting paid some good money to fights. He's definitely upper echelon. So if he wins this fight and he wins it impressively, I don't see any reason why he does not get a title shot next. To be perfectly honest, that I just don't see why they would not try to have him fight. I mean, maybe give him, if you want to kind of put it out there, and if you need to promote him a little more and build his name, you give him one more fight, maybe against that kid that Cody had knocked out, the Brazilian kid. The name falls by, he's ranked in that top 5. If he beats a Sunsao, how do you not? Because he's going to put himself right into that spot. If Moraes beats a Sunsao, especially if he beats him impressively, and you do not see Moraes ranked at the number 3 bantamweight in the world after that fight, if you see him at like fucking 6, makes me angry because I see the way these idiots rank guys. But if you see him at 6, at 7, that's just complete BS. All right. If you beat the number 3 guy in the world, you are now the number 3 guy in the world at the very least. Let's see how that works out. I'm taking Moraes in this fight. I'm just taking Moraes just because it's almost in a way I'm kind of really not being that objective, where I'm pulling a little bit for him in this, even though I like a Sunsao very much. Respect both these guys so much on what they do coming out and how hard they train and for how they put themselves out there. And Sunsao always comes to fight. He's might have had some lackluster performances in a couple of maybe lackluster victories, even in the UFC and during that win streak. But he's always been impressive. Sometimes you have to do what you need to do to scrap out a victory, and it's tough to always be exciting and put yourself out there, and you're giving yourself also the opponent that opportunity to knock you out, and obviously nobody wants that. But let's push to the main card, the pay-per-view event starting at 10 p.m. in Rio de Janeiro. UFC 212, Max Holloway. I don't want to keep calling him Holiday. Maybe because I saw Matt Holiday hit a home run last night, but it wasn't enough for the Yanks. Anyhow, the opening fight is Eric Silva against Yancy Medeiros, a 155-pound matchup. Medeiros, who I believe has fluctuated a few of his fights. I think he's fought at 145 as well as 155. Silva moving down from 170, fighting at 155. This should be a pretty interesting. I think that's right. If I got this wrong, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna go back and edit it. But they have the 2 different weights, and they didn't really kind of distinguish that here. But let me see. That's actually a pretty good question. And I did watch the weigh-ins. I just didn't remember what they announced those guys at. Unfortunately. Well, yeah, all these other fights they're all at the same weight except for this one. Let me just go on real quick and just do check on weigh-in results with someone. So anyway, we'll still talk about that while I'm searching. I do like I still like Silva in this fight. We'll see if he is cutting a lot of weight, if that kind of hurts him out or hurts him at all. So we will see. Medeiros is definitely a. Here we go. Medeiros is crafty veteran's been fighting a long time. Both these guys have. Silva's is been so impressive in some fights and then so inconsistent in others. So I think this could be one of the better fights of the night. Yep. I'm sorry. This fight is going to be contested at 170 pounds. Both men weighed in at 171. So I am glad I checked that, so I didn't get any goons telling me how stupid I am. Believe me, I really already know. But I'm going with Silva in this fight. I think he's trying to learn from a lot of his mistakes. And as long as his chin is still there and it hasn't gone, bye-bye like you've seen from a lot of guys that have been, knocked out, which he's had some rough outings. I think this could go his way, and that's who I have on the board. This next fight is this kid, this Paulo Bacchina, who I totally believe that the UFC is really trying to build this kid. I think they really want this kid to be their next Brazilian star, but they're not. They're going to go about it a little quietly here at first, and I think build him up with some of his victories, and then I think if he wins this fight impressively, which I think he will, Holloway Bangbos is a tough kid, and just kind of the way that they put this matchup together, it just kind of makes me think that they are throwing Holloway. If I'm saying wrong, I'm sorry. I don't remember how it was pronounced there on the weigh-in show and whatnot, but I think they're throwing him to the wolves with this fight. Having him fight this young kid here in Brazil, he's definitely going to be a crowd favorite. Brazilians love seeing Americans matched up against Brazilians, especially for some reason. They especially love seeing when it's an African American. I think I just see the way, because then I just see the way that they kind of react to these in these fights. To the fighters from the other countries. But that's just me. I could be off on that. But I do like Paulo in this fight. I'm not even going to try to say his last name right now. I'm going to try to practice it tonight when I'm watching the broadcast. But I think he's a really big up-and-comer, man. He's won all his fights by knockout or submission. I believe he's one submission. He's undefeated in UFC. He's at least 2-0, and he's a beast. And Holloway's been knocked out a bunch of times, a few times. But he's a pretty scary fighter. He hasn't fought in a year. And it seemed like he might have. For some reason, I think he had a little problem cutting weight because he came in a lot lighter than what you would think. He came in at 184 and he could have came in at 86. So it seems like he might have been cutting weight a little longer than what he should. And I know he's a big middleweight as it is. And I just think that Paulo. Holloway has a loss to Uriah Hall, and obviously I think that was his first UFC fight, and you get the jitters, and I guess those things are real. I don't know, I've never experienced that personally myself. But with that being said, I think Paulo would destroy Uriah Hall, but that's just my opinion, and we probably could see that fight coming up after he wins this next one. So. That's who I have on the board. Now we're going to get into this really interesting fight, which is next. And there's this fighter on here that his name is Vitor Belfort, and he is fighting Nate Marquardt. And this is like the UFC's version of like when Bellator did like Gracie versus Shamrock, in a way. I mean, they're not as old as those guys, but both these guys are pretty old and have just so much experience and been fighting such a long time. And the reason why I say that the way I say it, I'm not trying to be a prick about it, but I think that both these guys I know Nate has had a couple wins actually recently that were pretty good on his part, but he's also had some really bad loss, like when I say bad loss, I just mean the way it looks and how he was knocked out and how far, just things like that. And obviously the same thing with Vitor. But in Vitor's defense, Vitor has been fighting the best guys in the division, in the weight class in the world. Vitor has been fighting these guys, the likes of Chris Weidman's and the Musasis and the Jacares, and look, those guys kill each other, and Vitor's obviously not on the TRT or on any type of steroid like what it used to be, which I generally don't. In most sports, I really don't care if fighters, if these athletes use performance and they love the label performance enhancing drugs, but because you're obviously, like, it's Chael Sonnen says, you're not going to do anything that's going to hurt your freaking body while you're training. You're a professional athlete. You're going to try to do something that's going to help you. They're always looking for an edge. And speaking of Chael Sonnen, real quick, before I get into the Vitor fight, Chael Sonnen, Vanderlei Silva, a 203 Fight Network here, will be doing a preview of that fight. I'm going to be buying that pay-per-view. I'm hoping to find a way to watch the undercard, the Bellator 180 part of the card, and the Bellator PPV, the pay-per-view, which is going to be headlined by Vanderlei Silva, the fighter who has not fought in over 5 years and has been suspended for life and then reinstated, but has not been licensed to fight in the Northeast here. I'm sorry, in the continental United States. The North America has not been licensed to fight in there in closer to 6 or 7 years. Last fight was in Japan. He's had some problems, so I'm really wondering if he's going to make it through here. I know Bellator doesn't normally have these cancellations like you see in the UFC, and you don't see a lot of guys in Bellator getting popped because they don't have USADA. But with the New York Commission being as screwed up as it is, I'm really surprised that this fight might happen. Chael will always make that walk. I'm sure if Scott Coker was smart, which I know he is, he's going to have someone on standby for Chael, and I'm sure freaking Chael even knows that at this point, and he's not obviously going to say a word about it. But Vitor Belfort versus Nate Marquardt. I'm kind of going to go with Marquardt in this because I think Marquardt is going to try and do what, say, like a Weidman did to him, and that's use grappling and wrestling and more keep him up against the cage, bully him around. Vitor's not as strong as what he used to be. If Nate can withstand that first 20, 25, 30 seconds of that onslaught that Vitor can bring out on you, I do believe that he can win this fight, and I don't see this fight going really past too long in the second round. And I see both these guys kind of getting bloodied up if one of them doesn't get that perfect tag on there and flatten out their opponent. But I've seen those flash knockouts happen though. Nate and Vitor is just he's really a tough guy, but he's just such a shell of his former self, and being in the fact that he's really not allowed to do what he considers his medicine anymore to be able to perform. I mean, I really hate to say this because, like I was saying before I went off on my little tangent there about Bellator, I think that like I said, he's like a little shell of himself, and it's unfortunate, man. It really is unfortunate, and it really makes you think that he might have abused some types of synthetic testosterones in his career to have to put him at that point to where he has to, regenerate it even more so than a person his age would have to. But I'm going with Marquardt in this because, like I said, I think he can probably bully him if he can survive that onslaught. Because that's really where Vitor comes out. I know he's lost a little bit of his speed, but he still comes out like like he's shot out of a cannon sometimes, and and he's still has a great hand speed, man. And Vitor's tough off his back. Obviously, he almost broke freaking John Jones's arm there back in the day, but that was a few years ago, and this is not going to be Vitor's last fight in the UFC, at least not by Dana White's standards. So as long as Vitor wants to fight at least one more time in the UFC, maybe it'll be against Chuck Liddell. I heard he's been calling out Chuck Liddell. Vitor likes to call out people that I think really in his mind, obviously, he thinks he could beat and really look good doing it. And that's kind of why he referenced to CM Punk wanting to fight CM Punk, which I never really understood that at all. I'm sure if he met Phil Brooks I bet she probably liked Phil Brooks. You know, everything I've really heard about Phil Brooks from some people that I know personally that know him, and just all the things that I've heard, you know, in a non-working type of situation in wrestling, I heard he's a pretty good guy, a really good guy, you know, and you can understand if he had, you know, a lot of the reports of him being, you know, a jerk or whatnot has come out of wrestling, especially from the people that were kind of were pricks to him. So you can always believe everything you hear. But I was, like I said, surprised that Vitor never, you know, the way he calls out certain guys like that. And he did mention that he would be a fan or would love to participate if there was like a Legends League, which I could really kind of see coming out now, especially with guys the likes of like Matt Hughes and whatnot. And the UFC might be smart in a marketing ploy to maybe try to get some of their old fighters that want to fight a couple more times and do that. And maybe not make a league, but maybe fucking screw it, man. Do a pay-per-view and put 5, you know, try to get 10 legends together. Maybe some that are still active, you know, and you know, you can, you know, throw like a BJ Penn on there, and you can even throw a freaking Anderson Silva on that card because he's old enough to be in there as a legend, and see how it shakes out. But like I said, I'm going with Mark Hart, and I'm going to move on now to the co-main event. We're at now 36 minutes. Sorry, so I hope y'all are staying tuned in. If you can't keep your concentration up enough for this, you know, take you know, one of those ADD pills or something, or you know, do something. And by the way, if you're still listening, please hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would appreciate a subscribe. I don't bombard with videos. If you want to subscribe and hit that bell, I would definitely appreciate that. I do reviews of the UFC Ultimate Fighter show every Wednesday night. I do miss a couple nights here and there, but there will be one Wednesday night, and it will be live after the show, 11:30 Eastern. I like to get a little settled in, and then I'll put that out live. There will be a preview show for the next UFC coming up next week. Mark Hunt versus the big dog there, the Black Beast. So that is happening in Auckland, New Zealand. I will be catching that card, and I will be previewing and reviewing the fight card after that the next week that's in the Philippines with Holly Holm versus Base Correa. So, and like I said, we have a lot of fights coming up every week here in June. I will be reviewing them. That's the type of content you'll get. I'm also going to be reviewing the UFC David White's shows, one that he's doing on YouTube, which will probably be coming out soon, and I think I'm going to give a review of the first one of Season 2, Looking for a Fight. The next one will be coming out. I know they just filmed it. I'm going to review that as well, and I'm going to do his Tuesday night fight that's going to be on YouTube that they're going to be doing that they just announced. I'll have those all coming up. So look forward to that on the channel. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for all the love and the continued support from everyone who watches and watches religiously. I don't care if it's one person or if it's a million people. I do appreciate you all that watch from top to bottom. Now, let's get to the co-main event of the main pay-per-view card. Claudia Gadelha, and I only say her first because I can say her name easier, but one of my more favorites, kind of got a little bit of a crush on her, I think, and you'll never normally hear me say that because I try to keep it professional here, but Karolina Kowalkiewicz, I just love her, man. She's great. I love her attitude. She's a phenomenal I really like both these girls a lot. They're both phenomenally, just great, phenomenally skilled, and you know, tough, both tough as nails. I don't think that being in Brazil is going to affect Carolina like it would another fighter in this situation, and Gadelha definitely will still have an advantage being from Brazil. I know she doesn't train in Brazil full time or probably even much at all anymore, and hasn't been there in a while. And I think she's gonna have a phenomenal, great performance. And I think it's gonna be such a close fight. Both these girls, I believe if I remember the records correctly, I'm not gonna waste any time going back because I'm gonna talk a few minutes about the main event. So we're gonna go way over what I originally wanted to, over double. But hopefully stay tuned. And anyhow, I think, you know, both these girls have losses to the champ Joanna, and Claudia obviously fought her twice. Did the Ultimate Fighter, was a coach with her, coached against her, excuse me, and you know, just these girls are great, man. She was a split decision loss in her first fight to Joanna. I believe it was her first loss. And the second fight was a little more in Joanna's favor. Generally, when you see through in time, when that fighter that's a little bit better skilled, and that's not a knock on the fighter that loses at all, especially if it's a close fight. You know, that first fight's close. In the rematch, you do usually see the you don't usually see it turned into a rubber match all that often. Once in a while it happens. You do have your Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture match, and there's some others over the years that kind of went that way as well. But I wasn't too surprised that she wasn't able to beat Joanna in the second fight. But with saying that, the reason why I bring that up is because I feel that Karolina Kowalkiewicz has a really good chance against Joanna in the second fight if she can get past this one. I think that if you look, I look at a lot of the fights she's had. She's beaten a lot of really good girls in the strawweight division that have she's beaten Rose, and Rose is really the next one in line for the title shot, considering she hasn't fought Joanna yet. So I really wouldn't be surprised if we see Rose fight Joanna. I don't see Rose beating Joanna, but the winner of that, and the winner of this fight tonight, I think will probably get a title shot. I think Claudia would probably have to, and even though if Claudia can win this fight, which she's so capable of doing, I think that she'll still have to at least maybe another fight to win before she maybe gets back to Joanna. Maybe even another two, considering she's already fought her twice and lost twice. I think she'd really have to get in there, beat Catalina, beat any of the other girls that are kind of up there, say up and coming, that might be able on the mind for the UFC to throw against Joanna. Especially Joanna, if she's able to continue what she's been doing. But I'm going with Karolina in this. I just think that the way she handles stuff, and it just seems like her attitude, which is just great. It's not like she doesn't care, but she just takes it in and just doesn't let it affect her, and it's just really kind of refreshing. So I don't see her being affected by the crowd. I know that she's been over in Brazil for a little bit extra time, I think, so she's kind of gotten a little more acclimated. Kind of what Max Holloway did. He went back a little early to get a little, try and make sure that he's doing fine. He did look a little drawn out, and I'm going to get to that next for the weigh-in. But this is going to be a good fight. I see it going 3 rounds and being a close decision. Hopefully, if Karolina can dominate this fight a little more, so then she can keep it out of not give the judges much of a choice, but to give her that decision. But there is always a distinct possibility of some hometown judging, especially in Brazil. No offense, Brazil, but that'll happen more so than you'll see it. Especially maybe you see it in England, because a lot of people will argue that Michael Bisping, Anderson Silva, but I still think that that was a tough fight. I really have to go back and watch that again and really score it. I at the time when I saw that fight, Silva Bisping, I wasn't sitting down wondering really in depth. But good luck to both these women. They're both phenomenal, great fighters. I enjoy watching both of them, and I'm not gonna lie. Sorry, Claudia. I like Claudia a lot as well, but I am kind of pulling for Karolina in this fight. Now, to the main event of the evening, and sorry it took so long to get to it. Now, this fight will this fight's going to be a war, man. Jose Aldo, the quote unquote greatest welterweight of all time. I'm sorry, featherweight of all time. Max Holloway, the interim champ, beat Anthony Pettis, is on a 10-fight winning streak. Has beaten everyone in the featherweight division at this point, except for Jose Aldo. Has only lost his last loss, not his only loss, but his last loss being to, I think he actually lost 2. I'm not sure, but they are calling it out as his last loss, so I'm going to go with it. To Conor McGregor, which was a great fight. Went the distance with Conor. Conor, they said, Conor hurt his knee in that fight, fought it a little bit differently, but they, were on their feet a little bit here and there. And Max is long and rangy, and Conor's really said publicly that that's the type of fighter that will give him a lot of problems. I do think that some of the leg kicks by Jose Aldo can come into play here. Jose Aldo has to fight this fight a little bit differently. Like I said, Max is a lot longer and has a great speed and great accuracy in his punches, more so than most of the guys and most of the people that Jose has fought in this division. McGregor is long. McGregor was able to beat him to the punch. Obviously, it only took one. That's the kind of power Conor has and accuracy that he has. I think that you can see something similar to that from Max. Maybe I'm not saying he's going to knock him out in 13 seconds, but if he's able to frustrate Jose to get him to rush in at any point in this fight, you're definitely gonna see Jose get tagged. So he's not in his head like Conor was, but Jose's got to use his leg kicks and try to keep him at bay and be able to move in, get inside with his leg kicks and kind of put the fight in that direction and fight basically how he normally fights. But like I said, it's going to be tough because he's used to fighting guys maybe that he's a little bigger than or same type of size. Like Max Holloway's a different animal, man. In this featherweight division, he's very tall, very lanky, and he's able to cut the weight and still put on a good performance. I don't know what he walks around at, but I'm sure he's definitely in the 160s. If he's out of a camp. And this has the makings of really just propelling Max Holloway into superstardom if he can, get through and win this fight. And the reason why I'm really kind of pushing for Max here in this fight is because I think if Max wins this fight and unifies these belts, he can definitely put a face now behind one of their champs, and he'll take on people at 145. Max isn't going to sit there and talk. Maybe he will in some time want to talk about some super fights here or there, but I'm sure that he's going to want to defend that belt, and that seems like the fighter that he is. That's my problem with a lot of these fighters and a lot of these champs, man. They win the belt and they're not worrying about defending the belt. They're more worried. I'm going to go down. I'm going to go up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Defend your belt. The only time that they've ever talked about a fighter moving up, moving down, champion versus champion, is when you had a guy like BJ Penn fighting George St. Pierre. Okay, and you knew that. BJ Penn's destroying all the lightweights. No one can really do much against George St. Pierre. They had fought before at 170, and BJ had given him a hell of a time in the first couple rounds until George finally took over and won that fight. But they ended up fighting again, and that was a champion versus champion match. And it wasn't for a belt. That was just BJ moving up to 170. And if you don't know what happened in that fight, you can look in and find out on UFC.com. But and like I said, it's happened on a few occasions to where you can have a guy like Anderson Silva, man. Anderson Silva has basically cleaned out a division at some point and has won so many fights so impressively, and they needed to use him on cards, so they had moved him up to 205 and did a fight. Now he had one fight where they put together really quick back in the day where he was fighting James Irvin at 205. And the UFC put that fight together because they were trying to counter-program, I believe at the time, a Strikeforce or one of those promotions cards. I think that even a Fedor might have been fighting on. And, Anderson knocked out James Irvin, who was fought at heavyweight and had fought at 205, a journeyman fighter, and embarrassed him. Later on, Anderson fought a catchweight fight, UFC 101 declaration. Main event, Kenny Florian versus BJ, the Prodigy Penn, the 155-pound champ of the world for the title, back in August of 2009. And he moved up and fought Forrest Griffin. Forrest Griffin, who was coming off a loss to Rashard Evans, the former light heavyweight champion. That could have been considered a super fight. They didn't really label it at the time that way. They sure could have. And we all know what Anderson Silva did to Forrest in that fight, man. I was there, saw that firsthand. It was insane. But these guys need to defend their belt, man. Anderson defended his belt a whole bunch of times, and like I said earlier in the show, Demetrius Johnson, he can kind of barter for a fight, or kind of dictate. He's got 10 title defenses, for Christ's sake, man. The guy's been fighting everyone you throw in front of him. They made a freaking reality show and said, we're going to get all these champions from all over the globe on all these smaller promotions, and we're going to have them fight in the tough format in the Ultimate Fighter house, and we're going to put all that together, and you're going to fight the winner of that. And he's going, well, none of these guys are really in the... all right, fine. Wait a minute. Screw it. He's said yes to them on so many occasions. Now, does it upset me that Demetrius won't fight TJ right now? Sure, a little bit, but it could be a negotiating tactic. He could be trying for more money, and if he is, it's about time, because he deserves... I don't know what he's getting paid, but whatever Demetrius makes a fight, he deserves a hell of a lot more. More people should watch Demetrius. They don't, because there's this thing about him that he's so small. And I don't think it's the fact that he's 125 pounds. I think it's the fact that he's a little shorter than at 125 pounds. That's my personal opinion, and I don't agree with that. And that kind of irks me as well. But, Demetrius will take out a lot of guys in weight classes ahead of him, in getting around him, man. He's a fighter. He is pound for pound. Not some of these guys that are 200 and something pounds. They should be be able to beat everyone. They're freaking 200 and Stipe's heavyweight champ of the world. Of course, he's pound for pound. I don't know how they try to manipulate that in. Here we go off on another tangent, but like I said, Holloway in this fight. I'm very excited about this. We're at 51 minutes right now. I'm going to talk for a couple more minutes about this. Guess we're keeping it under an hour. It's going to be a long day of fights, so I guess you got to go a little long with this preview and prediction show. So just to go back real quick on my predictions, there goes my freaking remote. Max Holloway, Kelikavich, Marquardt, Borchina, Eric Silva in the pay-per-view are my picks. Marlon Moraes, Eric Spicely, Eduardo Alcantara in the Foxsports prelims. Chagas, Pereira, and Figueiredo on the Fight Pass picks. All right? Get your bets in, people. This is going up on YouTube right now. So hopefully you all tune in to the fights. Thank you for tuning in to the 203 Fight Network. I'm Mark G. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you want. If you feel up to it, share the video. I'll always appreciate that. And once again, watch the fights. Don't miss them. And stay tuned after the fights for my live preview and prediction show. I'm out.